Long before the word industry existed, before men filled the skies with smoke and the oceans with ships of iron, there was the forge. A single breathing place in the corner of a village, dark, loud, alive. The air was thick with charcoal dust, the scent of oak, and the rhythm of a hammer that never slept. He was an old man, though no one could tell his true age. His face was carved by heat, not time, his hands black with soot, yet steady like prayer. To him, the forge was not a workshop, it was a chapel of metal, and iron, that cold, unyielding thing, was something he believed had a soul. Every morning before sunrise, he would walk down the narrow dirt path, barefoot, the ground still damp with night dew. From the forest nearby, a quiet fog crept between the trees. He said it kept the metal calm, that the iron preferred the silence before dawn. Inside, the forge was sleeping, coals dull and grey. He knelt beside them, whispered something only he could hear, and breathed gently. The embers glowed back at him like eyes opening. With one careful breath, the fire lived again, and the village began to wake. The bellows groaned, the fire hissed, and the smell of hot metal began to fill the air. Each sound had meaning: the hiss of moisture leaving the ore, the pop of a spark finding life, the dull rhythm of hammer to anvil shaping something eternal. To outsiders, it was work. To him, it was conversation. Medieval blacksmiths believed iron wasn't simply mined, it was born. They called it the blood of the earth. The ore they dug from the mountain still carried traces of its birthplace: charcoal veins, damp soil, hints of copper and ash. They treated it with the respect due to a living thing. In the bloomery furnace, they didn't melt the metal, they coaxed it. The fire never grew to fiercely enough to make the iron glow, never enough to make it run. What emerged was a sponge of metal and slag de bloom. The blacksmith would pull it out with tongs, sparks raining like orange snow. And in that moment, every sound, every breath mattered. If you listen close, you can almost hear it now, the low roar of the furnace, the bellows inhaling and exhaling like an animal, the hammer's heartbeat against the anvil. It is not noise. It is rhythms, the rhythm that built cathedrals, swords, ploughs, and the bridges that still stand today. The secret of medieval iron wasn't a trick. It was patience. They didn't use coal filled with sulfur or rush for output. They used charcoal clean, slow burning, rich in carbon. The iron took its time, absorbing just enough of that carbon to strengthen itself without becoming brittle. And the slag, that unwanted impurity, was never fully removed. It stayed thin and glassy, sealed within the iron's skin. That slag did something beautiful. It blocked oxygen. It stopped water from biting into the metal. It formed a natural shield, a thin, dark patina that protected it for centuries. When the blacksmith quenched the blade in oil or fat, the iron hissed like it was speaking. That final breath sealed it. The surface turned black, shimmering faintly in firelight. To him, that was not rust. That was armor. He would hang the finished piece by the door and whisper, "Let the rain come. Let the years test you." And often they did for hundreds of years. They worked alone. Mostly the forge was a personal world. Apprentices learned not by books, but by rhythm. The sound of each hammer strike told them if the metal was ready. A dull thud meant too cold. A bright ring too hot. Somewhere between was harmony. That harmony was the difference between a tool that bent and a tool that lived. In many villages, the smith was seen as half sorcerer, half healer. His fire could destroy or mend. His iron could kill or protect. People brought him charms, food, sometimes confessions. And he listened, wordless, while sparks rose toward the rafters like prayers. Every blow of the hammer was a meditation, one that turned chaos into order. They said rust feared men like him. And maybe it did, because his iron was born in balance, neither too pure nor too proud. It carried the imperfections of the earth inside it, and that, paradoxically, made it last. Centuries later, men would build factories, and the sound of one hammer became the noise of thousands. The air would fill with the stench of coke, the glow of molten rivers, the screams of steel rolling across miles of machinery. Progress, they called it. But somewhere in that roar, the rhythm was lost. The old blacksmith's iron was still out there, buried in shipwrecks, hidden in cathedral gates, resting under fields. Archaeologists still find it dark brown, sometimes with a green hue. They clean it, test it, and find it intact. It shouldn't have survived 1,000 winters. But it did, because it was made to breathe, not to fight time. And modern iron, it dies young, 2 years, sometimes less. A new gate rusts faster than a sword from the Crusades. Not because we forgot how to make it strong, but because we forgot how to make it alive. For the medieval smith, the metal was a reflection of himself. If he rushed, it cracked. If he lost patience, it warped. If he disrespected the fire, it spat back. So he learned restraint, a rare thing in any century. He didn't chase perfection. Perfection was a god's burden, not a man's. He chased endurance, something that could outlast his own heartbeat. And when the village slept, he would stay by the fire, hands crossed, eyes half closed, listening, because the forge, even when quiet, was never silent. He could tell when the iron was cooling by the color of its breath. He could smell the difference between oak and birch charcoal. He knew the way iron sings when it's almost right, that subtle change in pitch that no modern microphone can capture. That was his science, his metallurgy, his art. If you walk through old Europe today, look closely at the gates, the hinges, the nails. You'll see them dark, uneven, but intact. It's iron that once glowed red in a forgotten forge. Still here, unrushed, unbroken. Holding doors that no one remembers building. The old blacksmith's name is gone. The village too may have changed, but his work remains quiet, patient, eternal. Because he knew something we've forgotten. Iron doesn't die when you make it right. It only sleeps. And tonight, as you listen, maybe you'll hear it, the faint ring of a hammer carried by the wind across centuries. The sound of the forge that never rusted, the sound of a world that took its time. The forge is quiet now. The fire burns lower, red like an old heart. Outside, the moon leans against the clouds, silver dust drifting over the thatched roofs. The old blacksmith sits with his hands open on his knees. His palms are cracked and dark, but when he turns them toward the light, they shine. He is thinking about what lives inside the metal. He always said iron had memory, that every spark remembered its birth, the ore, the fire, the breath of the bellows. If you listen carefully, he once told his apprentice, "You can hear the iron thinking." The boy laughed, but years later he understood. Deep inside that dull grey bar lay an invisible architecture. Each atom of iron, a soldier in perfect ranks. Between them, thin rivers of slag, frozen glass born from ash and sand. Those rivers were flaws, yet they protected the metal-like scars protect skin. They sealed oxygen away. They gave the iron its strange endurance. The old smith did not know the word oxide. He knew color. He knew smell. He knew the way a blade looked when the air had kissed it too long. He called rust red sleep, a sign that the metal had forgotten its purpose. His task was to keep it awake. Modern scientists would later discover that his bloomery iron contained thin threads of silicate slag, that those threads, impossible to replicate by machine, created a barrier that resisted corrosion for centuries. But he didn't need to know the reason. He could feel it. Every strike of his hammer was an experiment written in sound. In the bloomery, the charcoal whispered carbon into the ore. Not too much, not too little. If the fire burned too hot, the carbon invaded too deeply, turning the iron brittle. If it burned too low, the metal stayed weak. So he watched the color of the flame. Pale orange meant hunger, deep red meant balance, white meant danger. He fed the furnace the way a man feeds a child, slowly, carefully, never in anger. The charcoal cracked like bones. The smoke curled upward, smelling of resin and earth. Inside, the iron drank its fill and hardened its spirit. The bloom emerged heavy, glowing, dripping black tears of slag. He struck it gently, folding, folding, folding. Each fold mixed carbon and iron into a harmony no factory could ever reproduce. When cooled, that surface gleamed with a deep, dark sheen, the color of ancient water under moonlight. Centuries later, metallurgists would peer at those blades beneath microscopes and wonder, why did they not rust? Why did the edges stay sharp for generations? They found that medieval iron carried a living skin, a self-healing patina formed by carbon, phosphorus, and slag. The very impurities we now remove were the reason it survived. Modern steel is pure to pure. It has no veins, no breath, no memory. It obeys, but it does not endure. The blacksmith's iron, however, was full of life, flawed, uneven, yet resilient, like the men who made it. Every hammer strike compressed the grains, forcing them to align. The slag lines became walls against decay. Over years of beating, heating, and quenching, the metal grew dense, tight-grained, almost biological. The smith's arm was its heartbeat. The rhythm was its evolution. After shaping came the baptism. He would heat the piece until it glowed the color of ripe cherries, never brighter. Then, with slow precision, he plunged it into a barrel of oil. The iron screamed, a hiss so sharp it pierced the night. The smell of burning flax and animal fat filled the air. That was the sound of transformation. The oil sealed the surface, coating the pores in a thin carbon film. That film, invisible but real, kept moisture away. The black color it left behind was not decoration. It was armor forged from the breath of fire itself. Some masters even rubbed beeswax or tallow over the cooling iron, whispering words of thanks. Not superstition, but respect. They knew metal could sense care. In his world, there were no thermometers. The forge spoke in color, dull red -600 degrees, orange -900, yellow -1100, white too far. He knew each by sight. The right color meant the atoms were dancing, not dying. The boy who learned beside him would one day inherit that gift, the ability to see heat as language. He would know when to quench, when to fold, when to let the metal rest. And the resting was as important as the hammering. Because iron, like men, breaks when never allowed to breathe. There came a time when kings demanded faster weapons, thinner blades, lighter armor. Smiths began to chase perfection, cleaner metal, higher temperatures, new methods. They discovered blast furnaces. The fires roared higher, the slag drained away, the iron became steel. Stronger, yes, but colder. The impurities that once protected it were gone. It shone brighter, but it aged quicker. A cruel irony, in purifying the metal, man had killed its soul. The old forge fell silent, the bellows sagged. The last charcoal heap turned to dust. Where once one man and one fire could shape eternity. Now hundreds labored under roaring chimneys, each a cog in a machine too loud to think. Centuries later, divers exploring shipwrecks found anchors from the 1200s still whole, their surfaces dark, rough, but solid, untouched by the centuries of salt and tide. Tests showed slag inclusions forming tiny electrochemical barriers. Nature itself preserving what man had once made with love. Compare it to modern bridges red with rust after mere decades. Our iron is efficient, but soulless. It serves but does not survive. Back in the dream of the old smith's workshop, the apprentice asks, "Why does your iron never die?" The old man smiles, his teeth glinting in the firelight. "Because I never make the same mistake twice," he says. "Each blade teaches me where it wishes to bend." He touches the anvil, cool and pitted, and I listen. That was his secret, not magic, not luck. Listening to the fire's breath, to the hiss of the metal, to the space between strikes. In those silences, knowledge lived, the kind that cannot be written, only felt. Today we have formulas, blueprints, and equations, yet none of them teach us to wait. None tell us how long to listen before striking. We produce iron that obeys machines, not men. We call it progress, but sometimes it sounds like mourning. The old smith knew rust was just time trying to speak. Every metal wants to return to the earth. His job was to slow that return, to buy a little more life for something that would otherwise fade. In that way, he wasn't fighting nature. He was bargaining with it. And that, perhaps, is why his iron never rusted, because he didn't fight time. He worked with it. Each fold, each rest, each prayer of patience became part of the metal's memory. And memory, once forged, is harder than steel. When he finished his last blade, he buried it beneath the floor of the forge, not as treasure, but as proof. He said, "If it lives longer than I do, then I have done no harm to the fire." And centuries later, when they found it black, silent, and whole, it still rang when struck. The secret was never lost. We just stopped listening. Dawn finds the forge empty. The anvil rests like a small mountain in the dark, its face pitted with centuries of work. Outside, the village is gone, replaced by roads and rails and the sound of engines. The old man is a memory now, but his iron remains. We live in an age where iron is everywhere. It holds up bridges, frames our homes, binds our ships, and fills our cities with bones we call gut. Yet all around us it peels and flakes and bleeds a familiar red. Our iron dies young. The medieval smith made a bargain with time. He worked slowly, folded patiently, and accepted the earth's impurities as fellow travelers inside the metal. We, in our hunger for speed, broke that bargain. We purified until nothing was left to protect the surface from air and rain. We traded memory for efficiency. Blast furnaces roared. Slag flowed away in glowing rivers. Carbon content became a number. Patience became a cost. We built an empire of steel, and then watched it rust. Walk beneath an overpass after rain. You can smell it, that metallic temps, sharp as a coin on the tongue. It is the odor of young iron returning home. Bolts blush orange in their first winter. Railings bloom with freckles after a single storm. Our century is full of brilliant machines, but their skins are thin. We solved for strength, but forgot endurance. We chased uniformity and erased the little guardians' silicate veins, phosphorus tracers, carbon films that once stood between metal and decay. We made perfect soldiers with no armor. There is another story the old smith could not have known. The sky itself changed. Industrial smoke lifted acids into the clouds. Rain sharpened, biting metal faster than any medieval storm. Salt from winter roads sprayed our bridges. Coastal winds drove brine into every seam. Even the air became a tool against us. And still we asked of iron the work we once gave to patience. We forgot the slow rite, oiling, waxing, letting the metal rest, building a black skin that kept the damp at bay. We trusted paint and deadlines. We built quickly and paid forever. Imagine we could wake that old forge and ask the anvil for counsel. It would not speak in words. It would answer in weight. Slow down, it would say, let the metal breathe between your blows. Give it veins to carry memory. Give it a skin to keep the weather out. The anvil has no tongue, yet every dent is a sentence. It remembers each mistake and each correction. The medieval smith read those marks as scripture. He changed his touch, softened his fire, and lengthened the spaces between strikes until the iron stopped fighting him. Our factories have no spaces, only speed. We think purity is safety. Clean metal, clean lines, clean numbers. But endurance is messy. It tolerates scars. It welcomes small imperfection as a shield against a greater enemy. The slag threads we once threw away were tiny walls. They slowed the red creep of rust, grain by grain, year by year. The old smith did not polish them out. He hammered them home. When rain touched that iron, it met amaze. When salt tried to bite, it found glass, and the metal lived. Stand inside a modern mill. The floor trembles with power. Rivers of steel run bright as suns. There is skill here, and genius, and courage. But there is little listening. The machine gives orders. The metal obeys. The workmen measure heat with instruments, not eyes. They measure time with clocks, not breath. The medieval forge measured by color and by sound. Orange meant patience, yellow meant restraint, white meant danger. The smith learned to stop before the metal begged it. He left a little mystery inside, just enough to keep water from finding a road. Far below cold waves, anchors sleep on the ocean floor. They are black, uneven, and whole. Fish move through their rings. Weed sways from their arms. Salt licks them daily and leaves with nothing. They were born in charcoal fires. Their veins still carry slag like dark lightning. They have outlived their makers by 7 centuries. But on the pier above, a new chain stains the wood in its second spring. No enchantment protects the old, and no curse harms the new. The difference is only a method, and the time we refuse to give. If you must work with iron today, hear the old rules. Feed the fire with clean charcoal or clean fuel. Keep sulfur away. Shape at colors, not numbers. Quench in oils that leave a dark whisper on the skin. Accept small veins of glass, not as defects, but as sentries. Rub the surface with wax while it is still warm. Let it drink, and above all, rest between blows. The metal is not your enemy. It is a language you are learning. Don't shout. Listen. Let the piece tell you when it is tired. Let it cool as a living thing cools, slowly, in the dark. We know what would help, and yet we won't, because time is the only material we hate to spend. Our bridges must open next spring. Our railings must gleam by Monday. Investors, schedules, contracts, these are furnaces hotter than any fire. We make what the clock demands, not what the years deserve. The old smith had deadlines to harvest, war, winter, but he never let the calendar sharpen the flame past wisdom. He would rather deliver late than deliver dead. And so his iron lives where ours does not. Imagine a new craftsman in a noise-tired city. He finds an anvil at a market scarred, heavy, older than the stall. He carries it home like a secret. That night, he lights a little fire on a balcony and heats a nail blank until it glows the color of cherries. He strikes 3 times, then waits, then strikes again. In the waiting, he hears it the softest note, somewhere between a ring and a breath. The metal telling him, enough. He quenches the nail in oil. Black skin blooms on the surface like nightfall. He rubs it with wax and sets it on the windowsill. A year passes. Rain visits 100 times. The nail stays dark. He has no bloomery, no bellows, no apprentice, only respect. And respect, it turns out, is a technology too. The quiet end. If you listen now, truly listen, you can hear the world that took its time, tinges in old doors that still swing. Gate latches smooth under black patina. Tools buried in fields, shining when the soil gives them back. They did not win against rust, they merely outlasted it politely. We stand at the edge of 2 centuries, one that prized patience and one that prizes speed. Perhaps the lesson is simple. What we hurry will not stay. What we honor will. Tonight, let the old forge keep its watch. Let the anvil sleep under its soft coat of dust. And if you pass an iron gate tomorrow, run your fingers across the dark surface. If it feels warm, even in winter, it remembers the hands that made it. The hands that left a little earth inside, so the rain could not find the way home.